Well, welcome to Yakima Chief Hop's Cryo webinar. My name is Carl Van Evenhoven. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for Yakima Chief, and we're excited to hold this today because this month is the 5-year anniversary of Cryo Hops being launched to the industry at CBC in 2017. So we've assembled a team together today to talk a little more about the details, the history, and a little bit about what's coming up next. So I'll ask everybody to introduce themselves. To my right, I've got the engineering and operations team, and to my left, a couple of our salespeople, and Brad Benson on the brewery side. So Brad, you want to kick it off with introductions?
I'm Brad Benson, head brewer and co-owner of Stoup Brewing.
Mike Viskel, regional sales manager for Oregon and Northern California.
Andy Arsenal, I'm the key accounts division lead for Yakima Chief.
Juan Carlos Maravilla, Cryo Plant Supervisor, Operations.
Salvador Benitez, I'm the VP of Cryo and pelleting operations for Yakima Chief Hops.
I'm Victor Nunez, I'm one of the process engineers here at Yakima Chief.
Leo Valladares, Director of Operations and Engineering for Cryo.
All right, thanks guys. Juan Carlos is one of my favorites because in English it translates to John Charles Marvelous. So. Yeah. the man. I have to sit next to the big strong guy. Makes me look little. But anyway, want to go through a little bit of the history of Cryo Hops. I believe everyone has seen what I'm seeing on the screen, which is just the introduction slide. There we go. So we'll start from the beginning. 2014, actually, Juan Carlos and I, with a team, we found a place that had some cryo capabilities. They'd never done hops, so we literally took a reefer truck, packaging supplies, and our team down to run their equipment, and we did a 20,000-pound trial run to see if we could concentrate lupulin powder. And it was a challenge. The equipment wasn't really ideally set up to do it, but we did it. Yeah, we handled it. It actually ended up selling the product. So we knew the ideas were going to work. So the next step was, how do we do it ourselves? So we literally took equipment from our boneyard, pieced it together, actually found a spare air separator that a brewery tried to use that didn't work in their brew house. We just pieced together a bunch of interesting equipment and did 150,000 pounds in that first year. And it worked quite well. And interestingly, I don't know if you remember this one, the day we started up, the week before, a customer was interested in the product and they said, hey, we're going to be in town, can we come see it? And I was a little hesitant to invite someone in on the first day of processing. And we made quite a mess, but we did it. And they were like, wow, this is cool. And not only did they love the lupulin, but also they were quite interested in the bract fraction because it just smelled wonderful. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But 2015 kicked it off. 2016, we expanded the facility. We did.
Yeah, we like 1.6 million in 2016 from 150,000 2015. So we increased, and pretty much everything was made by Cryo employees. Mm-hmm. So, like Carl said, we use the boneyard, we recycle the equipment, and then here it is. So now we feel pretty much comfortable with what we are doing with passion and love, and we want the best for our customers, the brewers.
Yeah. So we knew we were onto something, but we had our challenges. We were breaking bales by hand because the bale breaker didn't quite keep up with the process. But the early beginnings, it was pretty exciting times. And then 2017 was when we were like, okay, let's really properly launch this. So we went to CBC, launched it. So that was 5 years ago this month. Where we're at today, we hit over 8 million pounds this year. And the exciting thing this year in January, we got our patent. So that was something we applied for. The initial days we started out just as powder, but then pelleting something that's over 20% alpha is pretty challenging because it's so sticky and resinous. But the team figured out how to do that as well. And so the pellet form is much better to handle in the brew house, and then it's much better for us as well. And on the sustainability front, it gets us to that half the packaging, half the shipping, half the storage. So there's a little history. You guys got anything else to add to that?
No, I think she should.
All right. So that's the history. Want to talk a little bit about the process. If we could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so we're starting with leaf hops, and the leaf hops get cryogenically frozen with liquid nitrogen. We operate usually below minus 50.
No, minus 100.
Minus 100. See, that's why I got these guys here. Been in Belgium too long. I forget these things. But yes, we're operating very cold temperatures. And the beauty of the process using nitrogen, there's no oxygen in the process either. So of course, heat and oxygen are the enemy of hops. So we work hard to focus on quality. So that's the exciting thing about this process is how we're not only concentrating the lupulin, which has all the resins and oils that contain all the aromatic properties that we desire to make hop-forward beers, such as what Brad brought here today. But it's also eliminating that oxygen reduces oxidation, of course. So, and that continues through pelleting. And one of the beauties of the process is we can pellet at room temperature, and that's something I don't believe anyone else in the world is doing. So, exciting on that front as well. Andy, you want to talk about the chief advantages of cryo?
Sure. So the first chief advantage of cryo pellets is it's double the resin content, which means double the oil and double the alpha. And sometimes it's even more oil than double. It's what I always tell brewers is to read the C of A, see how much oil, how much alpha is actually in there. And sometimes that will depict whether you're going to put it in more in the whirlpool or more on the cold side. And cryo pellet has the highest amount of oil content of any concentrated lupulin product on the market. So if you're trying to make a nice, juicy, flavorful IPA like we're drinking here, I think cryo pellets would be your best bet. And then intense hop flavor aroma, because the oils are double, and the way the process with the cold liquid nitrogen, you're going to have a nice aromatic product. It also has low HSI, which is a hop storage index, and some of the product can actually store a little longer because the HSI is so low. Has reduced grassy and vegetal characteristics, so a low amount of polyphenol character. So you get more juicy, more hop flavor in the beer than say like veggie and grassy flavors. And because there's less veggie flavor, you can have less amount of hop creep. And you actually turn beers faster and get the beer out of the market quicker. The next advantage would be increased yield. Most of our studies have seen an increased yield of 3 to 5%. For brewers, and I've even heard between 8 to 10% for some customers. So in today's landscape with can shortage, grain prices increasing, your increased yield from a product from cryo pellets is something that I think all brewers should really take advantage of. And then the last is cost savings. And again, because of the increased yield, you're going to save money. And then because there's less bract, you can actually dry hop a little quicker, so the lupulin will get into the beer quicker, and you actually turn tanks faster and save money that way. Now I'm going to turn over to Michael. He's going to talk about how to brew with cryo hops.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. So the few slides that are upcoming revolve around dosage rate, recommendations of cryo, followed by some applications with which cryo can best be used. And Andy brought it up with the points that he made prior with double the resin content of these hops. In terms of just kind of starting out with using cryo, a best bet point would be a 40 to 50% addition rate in relation to T90 by weight. And that kind of just gives you an understanding whether this is new brand development or maybe a brand that has already existed, that you haven't anchored to T92. Gives you a general idea of the impact that cryo can in fact deliver to a brewer. It's important to note that there are other concentrated lupulin pellets in the market, but what makes cryo compelling is the fact that you have a concentration rate that Andy had described, and one that we feel delivers intense flavor and aroma that is otherwise incomparable in the market. So that's just a brief overview of the dosing rates as it relates. So the next piece would really revolve around application. And I think it's important to note that, cryo can be many different things in an application space. It's not necessarily something that has to be used as your sole addition, although it could. I think that it applies itself very well with existing products such as extract, T90, or other products in that space very well. or it can be, again, it could sing by itself very compellingly. As it relates to where in the process cryo is added, from kettle down through fermenter, as you can see on the slide, are very applicable spaces where you would normally use T90 or whole cone, but the one piece that is really important to note is to really look at late additions in the kettle. We're not looking to add something up front where you would be at the very beginning of your brewing addition rate to where you would experience maybe flash off of flavor and oils that we really work hard to preserve and apply to these beers. So there's a lot of versatility in that space. So as it's listed, late addition kettle, whirlpool, your knockout, and your fermenter. And throughout these processes, as Andy had mentioned, from a yield savings perspective, you're gaining along those ways during those paths. So I think that's really important to reemphasize. But with that being said, I think what's really compelling about the beer that's in front of us too, and I'll kind of turn it over to Brad as well, is that this is an iteration of cryo that's used in different points of the brewing process. So that kind of shows, even though you're not tasting it right now, we are, and we're smelling it even from the table here, the impact that does provide. So.
Well, about the beer that we have on the table today, we've used a lot of these more non-traditional T90 products from YCH, and this one has resonate to bitter, and then we found that we actually still stick with some T90 pellets. We felt that they're sometimes missing in the finishing body if we do all cryo, like maybe it's just a little bit of tannin and vegetable material that's good. But we've got a little T90 in the whirlpool of Mosaic. There is some Cryo Mosaic and Cryo Citra or Cryo Simcoe that we don't have a knockdown chiller at our brewery. So what we'll do is actually after we've started running the beer over to the fermenter, we'll add it during transfer of wort to tank. And so we've dropped a few more points of temperature at that point. We can let it kind of just fall through the column of the wort, the hot wort on the way. Doesn't clog the heat exchanger like some bigger leaf T90 can do sometimes. And then we are seeing about a 4% increase in yield in wort when we change out all of our T90 to cryo in later editions. As far as the dry hop, in the dry hop it is some Citra T90, Citra cryo, and some more Simcoe cryo. And again, we don't have like a hop cannon or anything like that, so we're doing some of the old school dry hopping techniques where we're climbing to the top of the tank and dumping the pellets in the top of the tank. And we found a little T90 does help again because, like you were saying, that the higher oil content, sometimes the pellets float a little bit, and so a little T90 in there in that dry hop actually helps to kind of get the T90. We found they'll kind of sink into the column of the beer and then come back up and kind of help envelop the cryo and get it to dissolve a little bit better and fall through the column, and then whatever rousing techniques breweries are doing to try to keep those hops in suspension.
Good deal. Well, thanks for sharing that, Brad.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned Resonate. That's actually an old a name that we used to use. So the audience may not know what that is. So that's CO2 extract. I assume you're using 150 GMA tins?
Yeah.
Yep.
We are.
And are you doing pure extract, or are you putting some pellets in as well?
We'll
for
usually,
the bitter dose? We
get a good base bitterness from the extract, but a lot of times, depending on what we're trying to do with the bitterness levels, we'll play with a little T90 in the kettle too.
That's interesting. And you said you get a 4% gain on the hot side, but then on the fermentation side, what kind of a yield gain are you getting using cryo?
We haven't 100% swapped out T90 for cryo, but when we swap out about 50% of the cryo for equivalent, or 50% of the T90 for equivalent cryo, we're probably seeing 2 to 3% increase at that point. So we can, if we do it right, we can get about a 5, sometimes 6% increase in yield.
Nice. Well, thanks for sharing that. And that's one thing. Viscal, you mentioned just the gains. With those yields, with malt prices being higher, but shipping prices are higher today. So that's one thing that helps, as well as you're shipping and storing half the goods. And then literally when you're getting those yield increases in the brew house, that's more beer per batch. That means less brews to get the same amount of beer. That's less inputs even on your your gas and everything else. So that's where it can help on the economic side. But that's helps your bottom line too. So it's the thing that really excited me as we were developing this process is it checks 3 boxes for me. It checks the quality box, it checks the sustainability box, and then also the profitability side. So we're pretty happy to see the growth in the product, and I think there's more to come.
Yeah, the way we measure that is one more keg to the tap room, and everyone cheers.
Perfect. Let's see here. Do we want to go to Q&A? Let's see here, sorry. And go back to my, so yeah, we covered dosing rate, applications. So let's go to Q&A.
So we were sent some questions in advance. What are the differences between T90 and Cryo Hop pellets when it comes to sustainability, waste, and amount of water used?
Okay, we've touched on that a little bit already. So because we're doubling that concentration, it's half the shipping, half the storage, half the packaging. And again, that checks the box on both the sustainability and the profitability side. T90 pellets, they're called T90, I think, because back when they were originally developed, you got roughly a 90% yield in the pelleting process. Today, Salvador, who also manages our pellet plant in Sunnyside, what are your yields today?
We average about 97.1% weight yield on T90.
Yep. So and Juan Carlos also worked in the pellet plant for many years, and with that, in our pelleting process, the beginnings of our expertise in nitrogen started in the pellet plant. We were the first to use. Actually, this goes back all the way to 1999. We were the first to use liquid nitrogen in cooling the dyes, so we have the coldest pelleting temperature in the industry. We set a max of 105, but we rarely ever go above 100 and commonly produce under that. And again, that's a nitrogen environment, so that's kind of, if you go way back in time, that's where the ideas came from for using liquid nitrogen. So, and then you mentioned water. Was part of the question. Of course, there's no water used in pelleting or cryo production. I think that might kind of go to the brew house side. Looking at the full sustainability, a big piece of what the world's interested in is water consumption. So Brad, you have any comments on the water side of things?
Yeah, those increased yields that we have really are beer that's going into the market versus either hot break or trube in the kettle that has to be treated, then either dewatered and down the sewer or the solids into compost. And the same thing's happening in the tanks, that if our tank bottoms, we have less tank bottoms because of cryo usage, there's less of that slurry and sludge of hops that have to go out and be treated separately. So that exit ends up being, water, but water as beer that we drink. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. And, I don't know what the most recent numbers are. You hear numbers like it takes 6 gallons to make a gallon of beer, and I was actually at a brewery in Belgium, and they're down to 1.5. They claim to be the lowest in the world, which is insane. But basically, what you're saying is you are getting a little bit reduction in water consumption using cryo because you're getting more beer.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I think consumption's probably the same amount, but what's actually having to go to be treated in the waste treatment plant or something like that is lower because we have more salvage product that's going out.
Excellent. Okay. Anybody have anything else to add, or should we move on to the next question? Okay. Next question, please.
Are there other cryo products in development?
Yeah. Andy, you want to run with that one?
Sure. The one product that we came out last year was Cryo Pop, and we have that available right now. It's a blend, and it focuses on the top 7 survivable compounds that make it into finished beer. It's very pineapple, very mango forward, great in IPAs. And then we're going to be updating our survivable chart as well shortly in the near future. Anything else?
I think also the use of the cryo process for experimental varieties that are coming down the elite pipeline through HBC, I think is worth noting. So just adding again another iteration to produce compelling flavored beer.
And the survivable is quite an interesting thing that actually The R&D team and the sales team collaborated heavily on that, and we upgraded with a lot of additional equipment to look for the compounds. It's wonderful when we rub hops and smell them, but then through the brewing process, whether it's in the kettle boiling or in fermentation, just scrubbing out some of the flavors or the yeast changing compounds, it's like, well, where did all that go that I smelled in those hops? So we've analyzed down to the detail what the individual compounds are in the hop oils. And then we've analyzed the beer so we can determine which of the survivables we want and which are the ones we don't want. And then we create those blends to maximize the flavors that we want. So that's where Cryo Pop is that blend using the cryo process to really maximize those, because cryo takes away the Bract fraction. And so it's been really interesting work, and there's more to come with that. And as Andy mentioned, we'll be updating that as well as we get more information. Do we have any other questions? No. Okay. Well, I guess we can conclude then. Salute. Cheers. Cheers. And thank you, everyone at home. Hopefully you have a beverage in front of you as well. So, all right. Thank you, everyone.
We're out.
All right. Thanks, guys.